And here we are.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to our January meeting of the Curriculum Instruction Committee. Kim, do we have any people who would like to speak for oral communication today?
We have no oral communication today.
Okay, thank you. If everybody would turn to their agenda, we would like to, hold on one second. I have 3 papers here, hold on. We would like to welcome 2 new members to our committee. They are Trustee Rachel Zhang and Trustee Vivek Prasad. We would like to welcome you to your very first C&I meeting. We're glad that you're joining us, and we welcome your presence and your input to our committee. Thank you so much.
And Susan, Trustee Zhang just joined us, and I don't know that Trustee Prasad is here yet, so we might want to re-extend the welcome once they're here to hear it.
Did Trustee Zhang hear what I said, or did you just come on?
No, I think.
Yes, I just got here.
Okay, then I'll repeat it. Hi, I'm Susan. I'd like to welcome you and Trustee Prasad to our committee, the C&I committee. This is your first meeting, and welcome. We welcome your input and your advice. And when Trustee Prasad comes later, we'll welcome him. Thank you for joining our committee.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. All of you should have go ahead. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Vivek said he's going to join. I think maybe he's a few minutes late.
Kim, if he does join us, because I'm doing multiple things here and you happen to see him, can you kind of alert me?
Yep, I'd be glad to.
Thank you so much. Well, let's move to our next item. Everyone should have received by now a copy of the agenda. I would like us to, you all received the minutes from the meeting on December 15th. And I would like to know if, whoopsie, hold on one second. I'm jumping ahead of myself. We have committee norms. I would like everyone to review those for a minute. We start and end on time. We stay on schedule. Our microphone should be on mute.
Susan, would you like me to display those?
Sure. Could you please? That would help. Thank you. Sure. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
These are our committee norms. Take a minute to review them. Are there any comments in regard to our committee norms? No? Okay. So let's move on to our meeting minutes. I would like to know if there are any corrections that we need as a result of our minutes from the January 15th minute. All of you should have received those previously to review prior to our meeting.
And Susan, I also put the link in the chat for anybody who maybe didn't have a copy of them.
Oh, thank you, Kim. You're always helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
We also need a secretary. So I think before we approve the minutes, we should ask if there are any volunteers to take the notes, the minutes. I believe it was Jamie for last month, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Jamie. You always do a very thorough job. Thank you. You're awesome. Is anyone from the group willing to be the secretary, either for this meeting or for the meetings for the rest of the year? Everybody's so quiet. Is anyone interested in doing it just for today?
Okay, we have one. Raising
Okay.
hand.
Mr. Banerjee. Yay, Mr. Banerjee. Thank you. I don't see him on the screen, Kim.
He's there.
He's there. Okay. I forgot. Do we have to make a motion on that one? No.
To just have him take minutes for today,
Yeah,
I wouldn't think probably
No, I
so.
don't think so.
Okay, but Mr. Banerjee, what I'll do is I will share that document with you so that if you'd like to take it in, well, let me ask this differently. Would you like to take it in the template document that we've built, or would you like to just take it in whatever you're comfortable with, and then you can send that to me and I'll integrate it back into the template?
Yeah, I'm taking it in a notepad for now.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, now we'll go back to the meeting minutes from the December 15th meeting. Are there any corrections that we need to address in the minutes from that meeting? If so, please speak up at this time. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
A friendly reminder, you can just say, unless there is objection, you've approved these minutes, going once, going twice, and then Sid could just note it by consent, and then we.
Hey, Victoria, in all due respect, your voice goes in and out. There's a little bit of garbleness. Sorry. It's
Thank
hard
you,
to hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll try again. And I'll try.
That's better. Right there, that was better.
Maybe without video. So if there are no objections, no one has made any amendments, for instance, we could just say unless there's objection, we've approved, and then it could just note it as consent and
Are there any objections to the minutes as written? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Sorry, let me one more time, I'm not being clear. You could just say then, without objection, you've approved these minutes by consent. And then when no one says anything, it means we all agree with it, and then we can move on to the next.
I heard part of that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so is it that we are asking for approval without objection by unanimous consent?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So that the motion is, who is making the motion?
Anyone can make the motion.
Sorry, I'll move somewhere else, but if anyone else understands what I'm saying, just from parliamentary
I did.
procedure.
I understood
Okay.
it, Victoria.
Okay,
So
Sue,
Susan, what she's saying is you don't have to ask for anyone to make a motion, that you can just say, if there are no objections, the minutes are approved, and then
Okay.
we're done with it. And then we don't have to take a vote.
I heard you clearly. Thank you. Sorry, Victoria. Sorry. If there are no objections, let's approve the minutes.
All right, and Susan, once you're finished with the minute process, we do have both Trustee Zhang and Trustee Prasad with us now.
Oh, okay, thank
And
you.
we've got a couple minutes before our guest speakers are scheduled to begin. I think most of them are here with us at this point, but if you'd like to do that, welcome. This probably might be a good time to do that.
Okay, we'd like to welcome Trustee Prasad, Vivek Prasad, and Trustee Rachel Zhang to our curriculum and instruction meeting. Thank you for joining us, and we welcome your input and your advice on our committee. And we're thankful that you're joining us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks. This is an important topic for us, and Kim caught me up and Trustee Zhang as well in advance. So we'll have fewer questions on what this committee does. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you, because if you have questions, feel free to ask us. We're here to answer your questions. Thank you. Okay, so I guess the minutes are approved as is.
All right, would you like me to take it from here, Susan? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. For those of you who were here last month, you might remember that we received public comment from a number of members of the, let me make sure I do this correctly, FUSD Alum Association. Am I doing that right? Okay, perfect. And they were interested in sharing their perspectives with us about overall their experiences in FUSD, but since they knew we were talking about core and supplemental novel adoptions, they were particularly interested in sharing their experiences around what it was that they read as students. At the end of our meeting last month, the committee agreed that they would be interested in hearing from the FUSD Alum Association. And so I got back in touch with them, and they of course were gracious and said that they would like to be here. And so we have a few members of that group here to talk with us. And they're gonna just primarily present their perspective on things. Once we've had a chance to hear from them, then just to give you a sneak peek so you can be kind of planning ahead, what we'll do is then we'll take the information that we get from them and we'll go back and relook at the criteria that we brought together last month for the suggestions that we wanted to make sure were carried into core and supplemental novel adoptions. And I'll give you an opportunity to kind of relook at what we were thinking last month and see if what we heard this month makes us want to make any sort of modifications to that. So that's basically what the flow of the meeting is going to be for today. And I
Kim,
know
how much time have we allotted for them to make their presentation?
they have 25 minutes. And we're going to go ahead and get them started here actually just a couple minutes early because you were super efficient getting our meeting started, Susan, and we're a little bit ahead of time. So Amal, may I hand it to you? Okay.
I can share my screen.
Okay.
Let me just get the screen sharing set up. Okay, can people see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So hi all, and thank you for inviting us to present. My name is Amal Nanavati, and I'm joined by fellow alumni Tony Sun and Shena Kotari, and current student Megha Govindu. Although, as you can see by all these names, several other alumni and students have contributed to this presentation. And we'll be talking today about the importance of anti-racist curriculum and instruction. And Shayna, if you're trying to speak, you're muted. Shayna's joining by phone, so.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about why we think we should have anti-racist curriculum and instruction, and we'll be highlighting several key points by alumni and student quotes that we've collected, and then move into some overarching themes and frameworks. So starting with my quote, we're not going to read out these whole quotes, we're just going to go over some main points because they're a little long, but we encourage you to read them when we send over the slides later. But starting with my quote, in elementary school, I spent, like my class spent several months pretending we were on a ship to California to explore the New World, but much less time talking about the impacts of that colonization and about local indigenous communities. This is a pattern that kind of extended to other subjects like science, where we often discuss people who formulated theories of genetics and evolution, but not their impacts on people harmed by eugenics. On the other hand, Lucy, who graduated from American in 2013, talked about positive experiences that she had with English teachers who did incorporate diverse texts into their classes. This highlights a theme that we'll come back to, which is that FUSD does have individual teachers who already teach in ways that are nurturing the diversity of the student body, and perhaps we can leverage that expertise and spread it throughout the district to truly achieve an anti-racist and diverse curriculum.
Juan, a current teacher, highlights the opposite point of Lucy, where even though his teachers taught books about and by authors of color, the way they taught it left POC students in the class wanting, reinforcing student and teacher stereotypes, including jeers to go back to Mexico, and teachers who were surprised that he was smart. My experience as a current FUSD student is that the history curriculum does not acknowledge minority perspectives in historical events, and instead focuses on Eurocentricity. Further, in all of my English classes, classics are synonymous with white men.
And to be clear, we'll be sending PDFs of these slides to Kim Kelly afterwards, so don't feel like you need to rush through all the text on the screen. You can just focus on what we're saying. So this brings us to my quote. And since, as Megha mentioned, the curriculum equated classics and American literature with whiteness, it led me to feel that there was an inherent incompatibility between Americanness and Indianness. And this was particularly harmful to how I understood my gayness, because I grew to associate gayness with Americanness and incompatible with my Indianness. These experiences could have been mitigated by a curriculum and instruction that focused on intersectionality and represented diverse students. Tony hones in on the importance of intersectionality, given their identity as a queer, trans, disabled Chinese child, and they'll talk more about their experiences later in the presentation.
Well, I'm not a child anymore, I have to say. I am currently a teacher in New York City, where I teach theater in East New York. I'm full-time. Yeah. So that's where I'm at right now. I have my master's in curriculum development, actually. So anyways, so we're going to be focusing in on one particular framework for thinking through what anti-racist curriculum looks like by a professor named Guldi Muhammad, who wrote this book called Cultivating Genius. So she divides her theory into four kind of basic categories. And the first category is identity. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Yes. So she argues that what she says is our young people may feel like they don't belong, right? Specifically young people of color and especially young Black and Latinx students. They may feel that they're worthless or they're not good enough. Their academics and engagement are then negatively affected. And this is because of their erasure within the curriculum, or even the negative messages that the curriculum sends about Black and Latinx students. And this is a serious problem in FUSD. If you look at the countdown of how the supplemental novels list is constructed, you know, there's very little room for Black and Latinx students to feel represented. And then when you look at the core novels, there's nothing whatsoever, right? How are Black and Latinx students, or East Asian students for that matter, ever supposed to develop a positive sense of identity with the current curriculum? Additionally, we want to emphasize that we need to move towards intersectional understandings of identity, inclusive of LGBT people, disabled people, and women, because our current curriculum is not only white-centered, it is also patriarchal and homophobic and all these other things, right? We can move on to the next slide. Additionally, she emphasizes the need for skills and intellect to be balanced. She emphasizes that as long as oppression is present, students need spaces to name, interrogate, resist, agitate, and work towards social change. And she emphasizes that they need to develop the skills to be able to be critical consumers and producers of knowledge and information. So this means we're not advocating for you to spend less time focusing on developing students' intellects. If anything, we're cultivating their critical thinking skills, collecting and evaluating evidence, social emotional learning, all with the intention of liberation, right? And all with the intention of anti-racism. And that really brings us to the final point of her framework, which is criticality. She says that criticality is the capacity and ability to read, think, and speak and write in ways that understand power and equity in order to understand and promote anti-oppression. Just to give you a brief definition, oppression is all the forces that trap our students in suffering and destroy whatever power that they have based upon the different marked aspects of their identities, such as race, class, gender. So Black students experience oppression. students who are girls experience oppression, and girls who are Black, Black girls experience double in that way. And so we can use the lens of equity, power, and anti-oppression to teach our students how to make positive change in their communities, to liberate themselves and each other, and resist the forces that trap them within these cycles of suffering. As we've seen in the terrible mental health numbers that FUSD currently has, we are in a cycle of suffering. That is oppression. Let's keep going. Now, this is not just about curriculum. And so now that we've gone through those different aspects of curriculum, we also want to focus on instruction, because instruction also has the capacity to either liberate or harm and oppress students of color. So just a few examples are the instructional practices that marginalize and segregate emergent bilinguals, especially our young Spanish speakers, and force them to sacrifice their culture and linguistic identity. Additionally, you just need to look at the depth of anti-Black racism and implicit bias that contributes to Black children being suspended, expelled, and even arrested at higher rates. You want to talk about racism, just look at how many Black students are arrested in our schools. Like, we don't even have that many Black students. It's ridiculous. We want to look at the cookie cutter pedagogies that we enact that cannot accommodate various different styles of learning, and especially marginalized disabled students, right? And lastly, and that really gets us at the model minority, because the cookie cutter pedagogy is designed for this image of the model minority of upper middle class, high pressure households that we think that Asian people have, right? Or the model minority encourages us to think that they have. Do they really? So, yeah, and there's so many different challenges to achieve transformative justice, and we really want to emphasize these so that we can show that we need to have more concerned space. It's a very deep problem, and it's not just a problem with one individual book in the curriculum or a group of problematic teachers. And it's not really a problem that like one-off PD that you give to the teachers can solve. It's much more deep-rooted than that. There needs to be follow-through. Additionally, in FUSD, there's currently this co-opting of equity language. I've seen people weaponize terms like microaggression, terms like equity, terms like culturally responsive, and further harm queer, disabled Black and Latinx girls, and especially queer and trans people. Like, I've been on the receiving end of this, as I've seen people argue. I'm trans and queer, to be clear. I am trans and gay, and I've seen a lot of people say that being trans inclusive is not culturally relevant. But when they say that, that is not equity. That is a theft of equity, right? And of course, there's a larger problem of gentrification and the pushing out of Black and Latino students. Thank you.
So now that Tony has laid out, just how large and deep the need for anti-racist reform is, we'd like to talk about what the C&I Advisory Committee specifically can do. So I have a couple screenshots from your bylaws here. So the purpose of this committee is to advise and offer input into FUSD's curriculum and instruction planning. So the goal is to advise and offer input, and you're doing that to the school board and the superintendent. You do that by reviewing and advising on curricular needs. And one of the goals that are listed directly in your bylaws is to develop equitable curriculum. So how do you advise the board? You do this through motions and reports. So any report that's accepted by the majority, that's voted on by the majority of the members of the committee, can be sent to the school board and the superintendent, right? So advising and reporting is actually really powerful. So this committee can advise and report on many and create recommendations on many things. For example, the committee doesn't have a budget, but you can recommend that the school board spends money on professional development in anti-racist pedagogies. This committee itself is not in charge of adoptions, but you can do research and recommend that the adoptions committee adopt certain books or textbooks. The committee can also set target goals to measure progress towards an anti-racist curriculum. And we'll give one way you can do that later using the NYU Culturally Responsive Curriculum Scorecard. And a key point here is that any committee member can make motions, right? All you have to say is, I move to do something. For example, I move that we recommend that the board does something. And finally, subcommittees. The bylaws explicitly say that the C&I committee can create subcommittees to investigate topics which are too large for the committee as a whole. And the subcommittee will study and report in the area of responsibility. So what we've seen is that anti-racist education is multifaceted and requires thorough research for effective implementation. So a subcommittee can provide research-based recommendations by, for example, surveying current educators to report on the current state of the curriculum. For example, there are 800 supplemental books in the list. How many of those are actually taught, right? Investigating and recommending anti-racist professional development and detailing their findings and recommendations in a report.
So Amal did a really great job at kind of highlighting the powers this entire committee has. So now, based on what you know about the scope of the C&I committee, the alumni perspectives you heard, and the general global conversation surrounding anti-racist education, what systemic changes or recommendations can you make to diversify the curriculum in FUSD schools? So to do that, we're going to be conducting a Jamboard, and you can visit the link bit.ly/diversifycurr. And you can answer the prompt with the format I motion to or I motion that, and just suggest some active changes you can make right now. And the link is in the chat.
Yeah, the link is in the chat. So I see that some people are starting to get onto this Jamboard. Perfect. So I'll just do a quick walkthrough of how to use Jamboard. You see the prompt up here. If you navigate your mouse to the left side of the screen where it says sticky note, you can click on that and you can write your responses to the prompt as a sticky note. You can pick a color if you'd like, hit save. And then it appears. You cancel it for the next prompt, and then it appears. And you can move this prompt around. You can make it larger, smaller, and you can go back and create a sticky note for further thoughts that you have. So let's take a few minutes now so that everyone's thoughts can be represented in this Jamboard.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
What do you intend to do with what people put into this Jamboard?
This is just to help just to kind of get the ideas flowing. We don't have, this is for the committee itself, just I guess facilitating discussion, and then our presentation will move on, and there will also be time at the end to discuss this. But this is just to share ideas. Now that we've shared some alumni perspectives, like what are ways in which the committee can support these goals?
This is a resource for you all. I want to emphasize, this is not a resource for us.
And I just want to make sure that it's clear that this is a wonderful way for people to kind of process the information that you've shared. It is simply because someone puts posted up there that says, I move to, that does not necessarily mean that that is going to move forward from the committee as a recommendation, as a direct result of a posting to this Jamboard. It could, if after conversation, if after thought, if after, rumination, that's the decision of the committee. We certainly do have the the right and the mechanism to do that. I just don't want people to be misled into thinking that simply by typing something on a post-it that is going to necessarily set that thing in motion.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying, Kim. Yeah, the goal of this is to get the juices flowing. It's to ideate, live in the ideal world. In an ideal world, what could this committee be doing to further the goals of anti-racism?
What kind of motion can you imagine making that you would want to make, sort of thing, right?
Is this the end of the presentation?
It is not. So we're going to spend, I believe according to the agenda, we had up till 5:15. So we'll maybe spend 3 or 4 minutes with people writing their thoughts. Then we'll share some of our thoughts on what the committee can do. And then we'll move into Q&A and discussion. Yeah, it looks like people are starting to write some Post-it notes. That's really great. Keep those juices flowing.
Amal, and are these Post-its going to be a part of the presentation that you will send back to Kim?
Yeah, I can definitely, I can save this as a PDF and email the slides along with this Jamboard to Kim so that the whole committee has access to it.
Yeah, because it's kind of teeny weeny and hard to read. Sorry.
Right, yeah. Yeah, people are sharing many great thoughts. Keep them coming. This is a large committee. Hopefully everyone can share at least one thought here. Let's spend maybe 2 more minutes on this. Yeah, people are still typing. That's really great. And I see this question about providing more information about the NYU Culturally Responsive Scorecard. We will be doing that in subsequent slides. And perfect. So feel free to keep typing this, but in the interest of time, we will move on. And then in the discussion, we'll open it up for discussion and address these questions and such. Awesome.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's some really fantastic ideas on there, and I'm really glad that you guys all had the chance to kind of brainstorm. So keeping that in mind, let's go over some actionable, impactful recommendations that you can do today. So like we went over earlier, the C&I committee has the power to create an anti-racism/anti-bias subcommittee to advise adoption, implementation, and sustainability of an anti-racist and anti-bias education. So what exactly can the subcommittee do? Well, the subcommittee is autonomous and can conduct research by using the NYU Culturally Responsive Scorecard. And that's also hyperlinked. So when the PDF is sent out, you can check that out for yourselves. But basically, that's a mechanism to evaluate the current state of FUS Humanities curriculum. They can also form focus groups with FUS staff, work with the C&I committee to ensure accountability and implementation, recommend metrics to guide the district progress, and finally report all their findings to the entire C&I committee.
Additionally, we want to suggest advocating for funding for professional development. These are some of the things, by the way, that you can kind of advocate for within that subcommittee and research within that subcommittee is advocating for funding for professional development towards providing anti-racist, intersectional, and culturally relevant pedagogies for all FUSD educators. You might find PD that can allow teachers to share the anti-racist practices that they've found most effective with other teachers in FUSD. You can also fund PD opportunities with external trained facilitators and instructors to get you an idea of kind of what that PD might end up looking like what sorts of material would be covered in it. You can take a look at Diversify Our Narrative Intensive Workbook, which is kind of their vision of what anti-racism PD can look like. And it kind of lays it out day by day. If you want an idea of what that might look like. The sort of facilitators you might see are people like Britt Hawthorne, who has been doing anti-racist, anti-bias training for many years. And we actually have provided a list of over 300 highly qualified PD instructors who facilitate anti-racist, anti-bias professional development.
All right, and let's talk about potential ways these could be like anti-racist and diverse curriculum could be incorporated into existing kind of curricular divisions. When we're thinking about diversifying English curriculum, that could involve diversifying core and supplemental novels and ensuring students are being taught from a variety of perspectives. And this isn't just like, it's not even just about approving new books. We have so many diverse books that have already been approved for use in FUSD, but they're not necessarily being taught in FUSD schools. And changing that around could really impact the way that students are learning. And also, like critically examining race, gender, class, sexuality, religion in the curriculum that you are teaching is really important to ensuring that students are able to really think critically about the media that they consume, think critically about the curriculum they're learning, and see their experiences reflected in what they're learning. In history, this could include culturally relevant pedagogy training to focus on teaching about the history of marginalized communities, rather than from a colonial perspective, both in early grades and in middle school. Because even in early grades, when students are learning about local and state history, we have the opportunity to teach material that focuses less on glorifying colonialism and spending like weeks and months on how the United States was colonized by the Spanish than versus on indigenous communities and local history. Also pedagogy training for more culturally responsive curriculum, like resources provided by the Zen Education Project, to be more helpful here. Also, there are likely teachers across FUSD who are already incorporating these into their approaches, and learning from that wisdom and like taking those findings and kind of sharing them across teachers in FUSD could be really useful here. But anti-racism in curriculum is not just limited to the humanities and social sciences. I personally am a STEM, I just graduated with a STEM major, and I still found time in many of my like science and math classes to talk about the way that how diverse curriculum is also important in science and math. In science classes, you often talk about like scientific theories in the contexts in which they were created, but not the context in which those theories continue to oppress and marginalize communities. Also, like thinking about the history and power of scientific practices put into place by Black people, by Indigenous people, by cultures from around the world. In math and computer science curriculum, the incorporation of curriculum modules focused on the impacts of math and computer science could be really useful. For example, talking about algorithmic and statistical bias in statistics curriculum, or talking about the impacts of computing and computer science curriculum, which is becoming more and more popular across schools in the area.
So finally, to summarize, we hope that this presentation empowered you to understand the importance of anti-racism and the important ways that your committee can take actions on this topic. And we really hope that the follow-up to this presentation is an action so that it doesn't just stay in the discussion stage, but results in concrete changes for students. So here is a sample motion that we thought could be a productive next step based on the discussion based on the presentation that we had today. But at this stage, we'd love to open it up to questions, to discussion, anything. I believe we have up till 5:15 in the agenda item.
Thank you very much for this presentation. You have given it a lot of thought. You've done a lot of research. You bring diverse perspectives, and you certainly present them well and compellingly. And you guys are really smart, and you're articulate. And I'm just so proud that you are alum of Fremont Schools. Do we have things we need to do differently? Absolutely. But I think all of you are proof that really great education has happened and continues to happen in Fremont Unified, because look at what you are all able to do and the power you bring. And not that we take full credit for that. Clearly that's you personally. But I just am so glad that you were able to come and share with us. And as Amal said, we've got a couple minutes left. Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question or make a comment at this point? And probably the best way for you to do that is just going to be to unmute your mic and go ahead and speak. Oh, no, yeah, no, go.
Am I raised? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I am thrilled to see we have a raised hand feature. So let's down along the bottom of your screen in the white bar, at least for me, it's on the far right side. There's a choice that says raise hand. So if you're interested in speaking, please do that, and I'll be able to call on you. So thank you, Victoria. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. First ones to try it out. So I would thank you so much for so much thought and preparation. Should our committee choose to pursue a subcommittee, would the FAA be amenable to doing additional work with the subcommittee on this topic?
Yeah, I believe we would be. We've linked to several resources, but discuss it as a larger organization. But yeah, definitely. I think, we're all, as you saw, we're clearly passionate about making FUSD's curriculum and education more anti-racist. And if the committee decides to invite us in, invite our perspectives, we'd be happy to contribute.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else who's interested in a comment or a question, please go ahead and raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. All right, Sid, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a question on YC, the scorecard. Is that this is the first time I heard about it. Can you just mention how that scorecard is used, and is there any other universities or have made also some similar scorecard or not?
Certainly, I can speak a little bit to that. So I actually studied at NYU with the person who created the scorecard. So that's, think of it almost like a rubric, right? Like when you're assessing a student's work, you have a rubric that you use. You can scroll down a little bit, Amal, so that they can see kind of how it's structured. And so there's different metrics on it, does the, how many of the characters in this work are of these different races, how, in our curriculum currently, do we have diverse authors, right? And if you scroll down, it has more, it has general statements does the curriculum align to these statements, such as the curriculum features visually diverse characters and the characters of color do not all look alike, or characters are not assumed to have low family wealth or low income if they are characters of color, right? And so this gives you a metric to determine, what changes need to be made to your curriculum. So it's not just determining is your curriculum good or bad, but specifically what needs to change to make it more anti-racist. Does that, and specifically with social studies and English curriculum.
And one important thing here is that the scorecard is curriculum wide. So one important thing would be, as Shayna had mentioned, understanding which of the 800 supplemental books are actually taught, right? Because the list does have some great books that are very do challenge dominant narratives, challenge ideas of racism. But if teachers aren't teaching them much, then that's not really impacting students.
Great, and I see we have one more hand. Shilpa, I'm going to let you be the person who gives our last word or our last question. So go ahead.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you guys for this presentation. Definitely a lot of information that is new, and I'll definitely take a more deeper look into it. I had a quick question. I was just glancing through the scorecard, and you mentioned that looking at what kind of representation is there, and just kind of taking a note and making sure it's balanced across. So for districts or universities that do apply this, do they go through the scorecard for every book that they read or recommend?
So it's a general tool, I would say. This curriculum scorecard, how I would have seen it applied mostly is at kind of like within departments. It would be, so yes, in short, in terms of how I could imagine it, it would be like, you would take a look at the core novel list, right? What are the core novels that are taught in FUSD? And then you assess the core novel list. And then, and then with the supplemental lists, right, you take, that can be left more up to like the individual schools. Like the individual schools can assess, okay, what books out of the supplemental list does our individual school use, right?
Okay.
But at the end of the day, looking at the core novel list, right, it's very easy to assess with this curriculum if you're just looking at the core novel list, which would probably be more of what the larger committee does.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And once again, thank you for this resources and presenting. Thank you.
Great, and thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to getting your slide deck. If you can just email that to me, I'll make sure I make it available to the members of the committee.
Perfect, and thank you for having us.
All right, have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. So as I had mentioned, what I'd like to give us an opportunity to do now is to kind of hold on to what we heard from the Alum Association, go back, and I'm going to give you a little more information about our core and our supplemental novel adoptions, which we started talking about last month. And then I am going to have you go into breakout groups, and you can have some conversations there, and I've got a feedback mechanism for you. Before I start into that, is there anybody who has a question or something that they'd really like to have us address before we start this? Okay. Then I'm going to go back to presenting my screen for a moment. Okay, so I did want to just kind of give you a little more information and some new information actually about where we are in the core and supplemental adoptions. We have begun, we now have our master plan, and we are moving forward on the process that we are going to use to analyze and maybe make recommendations for changes to our core novels. And you might remember that the difference between core novels and supplemental novels, there are multiple differences, but the biggest one is that there's an expectation that all students in a particular grade level will be exposed to the core novels for that grade level. Supplemental novels, on the other hand, are available for teachers to teach, but there is no expectation that all students in Fremont Unified, for example, would be exposed to the same supplemental novels. So with this core and supplemental process, what we're trying to do is have a good balance between consistency of what students learn as they progress through Fremont Unified, and then the opportunity for teachers to present something that they find compelling, that they know their students will find compelling, and helps move people toward mastery of the standards. So we're looking now at our supplemental novel adoption process is already in place. It happens twice a year. In December, we approved 6 new supplemental novels. And you might remember that I told you what they were last month. If you've got any questions about that, I'd be glad to address those. We are looking at another 5 novels that will be presented to the board either in late April or early May. So shifting gears now to think about core novels. The process to change our core novels is more time consuming than the process to adopt supplemental novels. And you can, I'm sure you understand that's why, because it's a required curriculum. So here's the process that we have set aside. We're in the process of selecting our committee members, and Victoria Burbeck-Herrera, member of our very own C&I committee, is going to help us come up with the right English teachers representing grades 7 through 12. And then there'll be some other people that are on the committee as well, but the teachers will make up the bulk of the committee. The first work of that committee is that we want to agree on our really big overarching goals for what we want students to be exposed to across that 6-year span between 7th grade and 12th grade. And then those large goals are going to enable us to create a rubric, a more detailed way of looking for characteristics of a book. And you saw some of that with the NYU rubric. It'll be similar to that. Then I think our plan is that we're going to take our current core novels and we'll look at them using the rubric, and we'll decide whether they meet some or all of the criteria on the rubric. And then based on that, the committee will make decisions about any or all or maybe none of them that we want to continue using. Once we know where the core novels, our current core novels fall, that will give us a sense for where the gaps or the holes are. And we will begin to take a look at additional novels that we might need to make sure that we meet all aspects of the criteria in the rubric. And once we have that whole recommendation put together, then we will take our recommendation to the school board for adoption. As I mentioned, this is a long process. We're going to start it with a meeting in February, and I would like to believe we'll be finished maybe a year from now. But given that we really want to step back and agree on those large goals, it's not a process that we should rush. It's something we should go into thoughtfully and carefully and really hear from a wide variety of voices. The supplemental novels remain in place. They remain available to teachers during this process. So we're not stopping teachers from diversifying what they teach while we're working on the core novel process. So I'm going to unshare my screen here for a second. And just ask if there are any questions about that proposed core novel adoption process. Mr. Cruz, go ahead, and then Susan will take you next.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it seems like, especially with all these discussions about equity, is there a rubric for selecting the committee?
And I might defer that a little bit to Victoria. The criteria that I had shared with her, and I have to tell you, to be fair, I only emailed it to her midday today. So if she had a busy day, there's a very good chance she's saying to herself, I don't even know much about this. But the criteria that we have asked is that we have representation from every one of our junior highs and high schools, including Robertson High School, that we have teachers who among them have experience teaching across the range of grade levels. And pretty much that's where what I've asked of Victoria. I have to say, in the past, when we have asked her to convene members of committees, she has brought together really diverse representation. And so I'm confident that that will be a piece of this as well. But Susan, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Victoria to go ahead and speak and respond, and then I'll come back and get your comment.
Not a problem.
All right, thank you. So Victoria, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Kim. And yes, Edward, I did search my email very quickly though, Kim, and I see that. So I think the question I was going to ask is, whether this committee is this a standing committee for adopting core novels, or is the impetus for creating this committee basically by recommendation of our committee, right? Because this was something that we had expressed as a desire to kind of look through some of the standing curriculum that we had for our ELA at the secondary level. And then obviously, as the educator representative, I am completely in favor of having the teacher voice there. However, I'm wondering how this committee feels given the task given about having that voice. And if we had previously talked about the rubric, for example, being something that this committee had a recommendation on. And I see that you absolutely have that in the notes. So I imagine the input that this committee has given will be something that the educator committee looks at and uses to create rubrics. Is that kind of the idea? This committee is so rich with parent and community voice and perspective. I would hate for that to get lost in translation as we move over the committee. So I'm wondering if there's some loop back that can come about from there.
Yes, absolutely. So here's what I'm envisioning again, and it's a process that we're still kind of working on refining the details of it. But once we have finished this Q&A piece, then I'm going to move on to summarizing the feedback that this committee shared. You might remember we did breakout groups last month, and I've consolidated the feedback from the breakout groups, which actually was pretty consistent. It was pretty interesting. I'm going to give you an opportunity to relook at that, modify that today if you want to. And then, yes, you're absolutely right, Victoria. That will be given to the adoption committee, the teacher-based adoption committee, to say, this is feedback, recommendation, feedback, please. And I'm certain that it will be taken into account as that rubric is developed. I'm also envisioning doing periodic check-ins. So each month, as we meet together as the C&I Advisory Committee, I'm hoping to be able to say to you, here's where we are in the core novel process. We've met one time. Here's kind of the summary of the conversation we've had. We've met a second time. We've got a draft rubric. Would you like to take a look at the draft rubric? So I'm envisioning that there's going to be feedback going back and forth between the two groups. I see you nodding. Okay, you all right? All right. Susan, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Not a problem. I have 3 quick questions. The rubric that you use, what year was that approved? And you may not have the answer to it. Who designed the rubric and what does it look like? Because after hearing tonight's presentation, I'm going to do more research on the NYE Culturally Relevant Scorecard, because I think it's important to have that anti-racist, anti-bias component when we are selecting literature.
Yeah, so the rubric that the committee will use doesn't exist yet. And it's going to be crafted by the committee, certainly with input from you all in the C&I committee. We may very well look at tools like that NYU tool. We'll look at other tools that exist in the world. But before we get to the step of a rubric, which I feel is step 2 in all of this, I really want us to agree on what our overarching goals are for students for that 6-year span between 7th grade and 12th grade. And so I don't know that these will be those goals, but for example, we may say we want at least twice, we want people to be exposed to classic literature. We may say we absolutely want there to at least once or twice in the period of time for there to be something with historical significance, where we want there to be opportunities for very current literature that reflects the diversity of our student body. There may well be things like we want diversity of genres, so we don't want it all just to be novels. We'd like some graphic novels, we'd like some poetry, we'd like some plays. So those big picture ideas will then be what help us create the rubric to check whether we've checked all those boxes or not.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I want to make sure we have enough time to do this. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and what I'm going to be showing you now is the
We have a hand raised.
Okay, Susan, I can't see it right now. Do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Sharma has a question.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question, Susan, what you said earlier. I am just curious, yes, there was no rubric used, but I'm just wondering, was there any framework that was used previously as we were selecting these core novels?
So it's a really good, it's a great question, Parul, and I wasn't part of the last core novel adoption. I think it maybe wasn't done quite in the order that we're going to do it. It might have been done a little bit more from recommendations based on the members of the committee, and maybe starting with those recommendations as opposed to starting with kind of a big picture. I think their perspective was that they were just making small changes to an existing core literature list, as opposed to right now, I feel like we really want to we really want a big picture look at, are we headed in the right direction broadly with this? Okay, so let me, last month when you came together in your breakout groups, these were the kind of the summary of the feedback that I heard. Definitely, absolutely, overwhelmingly, there's a sense that we want diversity of authors, we want diverse characters, we need diverse nations and nationalities, races, experiences, perspectives. The importance of diversity came up over and over and over. Diversity as well in the genres that you were interested in seeing. There was a resounding sense that we want students to be able to understand the perspective and the intelligence of others, and then similarly have real world experiences that they can relate to themselves. So kind of bullets 3 and 4, I feel like go together. It's that windows and mirrors. You suggested that we needed complex and rigorous themes, historical themes, universal themes. There was a sense that teachers need the support and the training to do this well, which of course I agree with absolutely. There were suggestions that we connect the novels across subject areas, for example, to history, but there might be connections in other places as well. That we wanted some variation across grade levels in terms of all of those diverse items that are in the first 2 bullets, and that we periodically revisit the list, that we don't make this decision once and then leave it in place for 10 years, for example. So that was the feedback that we got overall as a committee last time we met. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to have you again go into breakout rooms, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to have the discussion. I'm going to give you another slide deck to work on, and let me give you a little bit of just a quick walkthrough on that. All right, so the slide deck that you're going to be working on just has an introductory page. But then as you move to slide 2, this is simply what you saw on the slide a moment ago, but I wanted it to be in this deck so that you could go back and refer to it. So anytime you want to click back to slide 2, you can re-access the summary of the feedback from December. Then, much as we did before, there will be a slide for each of our 4 breakout rooms. And the question that I'd like to have you discuss is here on the breakout room slide. So if you're in breakout room 1, you would go to this slide and just share your thoughts about this question. Based on what you heard today, should we modify the list of criteria from December's meeting, which you can go back in and find in slide 2. Breakout room 1 will be using this slide. Breakout room 2 will be using a different slide, and room 3 and room 4. So are there any questions about what it is that we're going to be doing here? No? Okay. Then I'm going to open 4 breakout rooms. I'm just going to let people be randomly assigned into breakout rooms. So let's see, give me just a second.
Kim, can you throw the link to that slide deck into the chat?
Yes, thank you, Jamie.
How much time do we have, Kim?
Let's see.
Because on the agenda, we come back at 5:50.
Yeah, so let's take about 8 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then that'll give us a chance to do a little bit of wrap up as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I put into the chat the link to the slide deck. And so I'm just going to go ahead and open the rooms. As you know, you're just going to kind of disappear out of this room. You're going to appear in your breakout rooms. Pick somebody that you'd like to have be your scribe. Yes, Mr. Cruz, go ahead.
It says we need access. The link.
Mm-hmm. It looks like it's across the boards, Kim.
Yep, I think now anyone who has the link should be able to edit it. So if you refresh your screen, you should now have access. Okay, good. I can see that quite a few people are in there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and send you to your rooms, and we'll see you back here in 8 minutes. Thank you. 7th through 12th grade English teachers who were a member of this committee who also wanted to be part of that committee, that there would be overlap there. And then I'm obviously going to be overlap, but beyond that, not necessarily any overlap.
Okay, so just if there's a month worth of work that is done, and then they come back to the committee here and we say, oh, we're on the wrong track. So it'll be good to have some overlap and maybe some even intermediate email-based communication so that nobody is surprised.
Okay, great suggestion. Thank you. All right, I think everybody is back from the breakout rooms. Thank you so much for your willingness to just launch yourself into space, interact with the people you get randomly assigned, and share your thoughts out on the slides. I'll be interested to look at those, and I'll summarize those and get that information back to you either before we have our next meeting or during our next meeting. So Susan, I'm going to turn the agenda back over to you for the last couple bits of closing kinds of activities. I have Susan. Have I lost? Oh no, there you are.
Kim,
Sorry,
Victoria,
I was muted. I'm sorry. Here I am yakking away.
Victoria Burbeck said she was kicked out and it's not allowing her to join back in.
Oh goodness. Okay, are there any suggestions for future agenda items and information to take to the Equity Committee? For Mr. Prasad and Ms. Zhang, Stacy is our representative for the Equity Committee, and she will be the person of contact. So when the Equity Committee starts in January, I believe, no, this month, she will be our point person. She's our volunteer. Thank you. Does anybody have any future agenda items or information that they want to take to the Equity Committee? Please speak now. Arti, go ahead.
I have a question, generally not necessarily for the Equity Committee, but I know we've spoken and we've given a lot of ideas. I feel like I want to know how teachers are feeling about these ideas and how prepared they feel to take it on and go into a classroom and do all these great things. Because I feel like for example, they mentioned that there's a number of supplemental literature out there, but they're not necessarily being used. And I can't help but feel maybe it's because it's difficult to identify with certain literature because it's never been experienced or read before. And that might be because, it's so for example, I grew up in Africa, but I'm an Indian. And I read African literature. I read Shakespeare as well. They're extremely different in terms of the worlds apart in how the characters behave, in the infrastructure the characters experienced. So coming from there, I'd be interested in knowing how teachers feel in handling supplemental or diverse literature.
Good question.
It may not be something we know today, but if you as teachers have a thought on it, it'd be great to know.
I didn't see the order that the hands went up. Jamie, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if we could, going forward in this section, maybe ask if there is a volunteer to take minutes for the next meeting. That way we just know ahead of time.
Excellent suggestion. Thank you. Would anyone like to be the volunteer secretary for our next meeting? Stacy, is that you? Come on, we need one volunteer. It's just 1 month. I would do it, but okay. Thank you, Parul. Or Shilpa. I'm sorry. Shilpa will do it for our next meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamie. Rachel, do you have a question or did you have something that you wanted to take to the Equity Committee? For Stacy to take? Because I see your hands raised. Trustee Zhang?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, lower hands.
How about Aruna?
Yes, as Aarti was talking about some teachers growing in a different country and incorporating this diversity, etc., here in the classroom. So do they need like professional development as our alumni just talked about? So do they need some kind of professional development, and would that be something we need to discuss here, or that would be totally different? How does that work? I'm not sure how it works.
They would definitely need professional development to be successful. Yes. Yes.
So are these points like, do we carry all these points that we are discussing here, or how does that help them, or how does it work? I'm not sure.
We can take it, we can let Kim know, and Kim is a part of that committee, and proceed forward.
Okay.
Could I also add that some of those things that people are talking about are captured in the slide deck. So that will go on to the recommendations for that core novel adoption committee. For example, professional development showed up last time and was reinforced again this time.
True. Thank you, Aruna.
Thank you.
Shilpa, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Just for the Equity Committee, my thought was that the FAA presentation, not necessarily like the whole discussion, but at least giving them the opportunity to go through the resources, there might be something that is relevant or something that sparks a thought for that committee also. So if that Kim has it, if they can have access to the resources or just the thoughts, it might be useful for them to see that.
Thank you. Trustee Zhang, did you have something you would like to have Stacy take to the Equity Committee?
Yes, because I remember that when my kids were little, and the teacher usually, show them a film during some break time. I also think that's a great time to utilize the time, and not only showing, let's say, American-made cartoons or movies. You can see some foreign films, and with different background. And I think there is a culture depth, maybe also some wisdom and philosophy, behind it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see Stacy's hand is up.
Yes, I would like to make a motion, but I don't know if this is the time to make the motion or till after we talk about the Equity Committee.
what kind of motion do you want to make?
I just wanted to make a motion to see if we can set up a subcommittee to look into the anti-racism curriculum that was talked about in the presentation.
Kim, do you want to give information on that? We can't hear you, Kim.
Kim, you're on mute too.
Hi, Stacy, can you say that again? I'm just trying to capture. So you're making a
I'm
motion?
sorry. I would like to make the motion to create a subcommittee to look into the anti-racism curriculum from the presentation.
Is there a second?
I can second that, Artia.
Okay. All in favor? Looks like the majority. Are there any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, I see 2, 3. Looks like the motion carried.
All right, we'll work on taking a look at who might want to be part of that and what that looks like when we come to our next meeting.
Okay. Are there any other items for our next agenda that, let me see here, we did information to be taken to equity, future agenda items. I believe our next agenda, our next topic is going to be on intervention, Kim, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Trustee Zhang, I see you have your hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. What did I do? Okay.
That's okay.
The raising hands and the microphones, it's just something.
I guess that's it for tonight's meeting. Our next meeting will be held in February on the 16th. And thank you all for coming tonight. It was a very